Tempted. I want to say it again. Tempted. I love this song. The great Paul Kennerley, ladies and gentlemen. I feel honored for a number of reasons to have recently met you through some mistakes we made, Paul. I feel it like was a sort of meant to be thing. And man, your legacy, the period of time you were working in this town, but the Tennessean graciously lets me choose the songs. Tempted has been on a playlist of mine since it came out. Certainly Marty's biggest commercial hit. Take us back to the writing of that song. You wrote it about a year before it came out in 91.
Yeah, I think I wrote it in 1990 only because of, I sort of remember the circumstances a little bit. But first of all, your passion for it is somewhat ill-advised, but I do appreciate
it. Let me tell you something. I'm going to disrespect you. That's a hell of a song. I'm surprised it hasn't been cut. I'm going to pay you the biggest compliment I can pay any songwriter. You know who I wished I could have heard a version of that by? Elvis. He would have slayed that thing. And I feel like it's kind of that groove. It's a basic time signature, but y'all did it better than any song I've ever heard. I start rocking with that thing more than I do with Michael Jackson. And I can't watch the video because I get up and try to do the dance, Paul.
I'm not sure that I've ever seen the video because I've seen stills from it, but also I do recall poor old Marty, in filming it, he had a bit of an accident. He banged his
That's right.
head. And besides which, I didn't have a video player or anything, or whatever those things were. I suppose television, but I never saw it. But I may have seen it now. I don't know. I can't remember. But Marty and I had written a bit. He'd been coming to see me before he had his deal with MCA, and of course, and I'd met him originally with the Johnny Cash situation. You know, he was obviously when he was with Johnny Cash. And so I knew him a little bit, and after I moved to America in 1983, and he got in touch with me shortly after I moved and said, could he come over and this, that, and the other. You know, we obviously became friends, and he'd come over and we'd hum and strum, and he hadn't got the record deal, but, you know, I think in my mind, I was trying to find a vein for him. Something he could hang his hat.
You found it in this.
Well, it wasn't the first one. Well, what we did was, you know, he just needed something to hang his hat on, and he himself was just so sort of cool, and because he'd snorted up Roy Acuff just as much as he, you know, he was also had a bit of sort of punk in him, you know, and just superb musician. And it was a wonder that he hadn't got a record deal. And then one day after he left, I thought, you know what, we've got to get, and I came up with this thing called Hillbilly Rock, and I sort of wrote it quite quickly. And I started a demo, and I demoed everything at home. I always did these things on my own. They were appalling demos, but for some reason, I think because they were so bad, they were quite easy to pitch because any producer or artist knew they could do them a lot better. And I know it's not Tempted, but it sort of leads into it immediately afterwards. And I was doing the demo, and Brent Mayer used to pop by because he'd been so helpful to me. You know, he'd encouraged me. He was producing the Judds, and I'd written a couple of those. And he'd come by on his way home each evening, and not each evening. And he said, "What do you got? What do you got? And what are you working on? You're working on something." And I said, "Well, yeah." Well, he said, "But it's for a friend of mine." And he said, "Let me hear it." And I played this demo of Hillbilly Rock. He said, "Man, we've got to have that. We've got to have that for the girls." I said, "Brensky, you can't. You know, this is for my friend who's trying to get a record deal." And anyway, he said, "Well, let me just listen in the car, make up a little rough cassette." So he went off with the cassette. About 40 minutes later, I get a phone call from Naomi Judd, and she said, "Paul, you know, that's our next single or something." I said, "Naomi, And obviously it would have been financially good for me.
Right, because they're the act at that moment.
They were. And here again, I'd say it was about, well, no, Hillbilly Rock was probably like 88 or something. But anyway, and I know I'm being a bore about it, but the thing is, that what was important about it was it did give us sort of a focus to Marty.
And really, you were spot on. That's the dart in the bullseye.
Well,
like they were trying to get this. Where's Marty's lane in the commercial?
Right, and of course the record, he did sign with MCA and Tony Brown, it's fantastic, but the record companies being record, they were hesitant about putting out Hillbilly Rock, you know, and I was actually invited to one of their meetings and I said, please put this out, you must put this out, if you put this out, it will get airplay. But they put out something else, they put out his cover of Cry, 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 or a Johnny Cash thing. And that record, you know, just faltered in the 80s or something on Billboard. And then when eventually Tony agreed with me and they put out Hillbilly Rock. And the poor thing, it wore its heart out going up those charts. It was on the charts for a very long time. But going so
and by the way,
slowly.
It's been maybe 10 years since I've seen Marty live. He played Hillbilly Rock last time that I saw him.
Yes, poor fellow. He's very misguided.
Marty turns into Elvis on your songs, Paul. I mean, come on, man. I know you're very self-effacing.
It is Marty. I mean, Marty had all this. He had it, you know, 1,000 times more than me. But I know I'm harping on about this, but so from that moment on, and it pushed its way up. And then they had the White House called and said, could we have a copy for it for Air Force One? Apparently, Mr. Bush Sr.
was a big fan. I actually got the privilege of being in the Oval Office with him a couple times. He was a big music fan.
Yeah, well, so that was nice. And those sorts of things. So it didn't get to number one. I think it got to maybe, I don't know what, 5 or 3, something like that. But it did give him a... So then we had something.
Yeah.
So, the reason I remember about writing Tempted was that I had gone to England. But I was thinking on the way back that, I've got to let's see if I can think of something to get us started on Monday when Marty comes. And I was on the shuttle bus at Nashville Airport, having flown back from England, you know, wherever you come in, Chicago and then Nashville, and the shuttle bus to go to the long-term car park where I left my car. And I just remember it wasn't anything to do with the bus. I don't think was hardly full. It wasn't anything to do with anything other than the fact that, you know, if you hum and strum, which I would have been doing up until I went to London, sort of just you keep those muscles going, and you have, you're not necessarily, you do a bit of fishing, you dip your thing in, you pull out a little small fish, you put it back in the water, and it had probably been a while since I'd had a something where you say, oh, I'll pull this one in, we'll work on this. Do you know what I mean? I know I must sound demented because I'm skipping around, but on this airport bus or shuttle bus, I don't know why, but just that, you know, well, it's just a 3-chord block.
But
and
it's but Paul,
and
you say simple, but those are the most genius songs ever written. 3 chords and the truth.
No, I know. Well, with me, it's 3 chords and the not so true. But so on Monday morning, I at least have that line, that thing. You know, there's a girl trying to win my heart, and I'm tempted. You know,
I'm right now. Genius, man.
Well, the thing is, so let's say it doesn't matter who these youngsters are.
Marty tells you he's got some rock song in his mind.
He's got this bridge. He's got the absolute tune. So
really?
Yeah, we just. It was like putting a little railway set together. It just went like that. It was probably the quickest thing we ever did. and it was seamless, and it just fell out, and we're just strumming away. We knew it felt right. So, but he was, I think he was in Texas on his bus, and Marty's buses are not hard to miss, because you can imagine his bus looks like his hair and his jacket. You know, it's got hillbillies on tour,
Bedazzled, yeah.
yeah, all of that stuff, yeah. And so they're on their bus, and there's when they're passed by another bus, or the bus going the other way, and the driver of Marty's bus says, "Listen, there's a call from a CB radio call from another bus. Do you want? And it's for you, Marty. Do you want to take it?" And Marty said, "Here is it. Is Paul McCartney." And Paul McCartney said, "Hey man," he said, "I've heard your record that you've got on the charts, and it's really."
Your Honor, I rest my case.
But, so that was nice. Marty told
Well,
me.
I'd like to do something that in over 200 episodes I've never done, because I've never heard somebody tell me they haven't seen the video. We're going to stop the camera for a second. I want you to watch this video with me, then we're going to comment on it when we come back. What did you think?
Well, yes, I sort of regret that I've never seen the video until now. I've seen stills from it, and I did know, as I say, I mean, he hurt his head during the filming.
That's right.
In a way, I perhaps always was worried about that, but he looks fantastic. Of course, to this day, he still does. And he always, I know that's to the track, but, but always, if he does it live now, maybe I saw him 3 years ago do it, and he always have a fantastic band, and he himself is phenomenal.
Marty and Vince are probably the best two musicians that ever put a finger on a string in this town.
They could be, and let's go back to Tempted. I loved that video. I mean, and that's so Marty. Everything's larger than life. And even before he had the deal.
Well, there's some chemistry with him and the interviewer, and we'll let people go watch the video themselves.
Right.
You know what you did, don't you? It just occurred to me while we watched it. You wrote the first ever legitimate country dance tune, because everybody danced to it, and I do, Paul. I got to tell you, man, I find myself moving every time I play that song.
Well, I am a stranger to dancing, so I wouldn't know.
Well, you know what else? When you look at what happened after 91 in country music,
right.
It got very pop. Some people criticized that, but I loved all of that. You may have opened some of the door for that with that song, but seriously, I mean, one thing gives other people a license to try. And I just want to finish by saying, I want to thank you for the song. I want to thank you for being the gentleman you are. And it's been a privilege to meet you. You're in my top 5 moments in 25 years in this job, watching that video with you, Paul Kennerley, just saying. Well, it was such a pleasure and a privilege.
Well, obviously for me too. You've been very kind, but I think you have a poverty of experiences, if you think.
Well, I will say I'm right and he's wrong. If you don't believe me, just ask Paul McCartney. Tempted by the great Paul Kennerley and Marty Stuart, the story behind the song this week for the Tennessean and Tennessean.com.